Hello and welcome. In this lecture, I want to show you how to create and run your first C program. The purpose of this lecture is not to necessarily have you understand the code that you're running, but to introduce you to the compilation and the building, how to run your program and kind of what you encounter. So the first thing you need to do is you're going to need to bring up code blocks. So you want to double click on the icon here and bring up the IDE. Now we know from the past that the first thing we need to do before we can write a C program is we need to create a project. And we know how to do that from a previous lecture, so I'm going to go through that quickly. But you just go to File, New, and you say New Project. We're going to select the console application. We're going to keep the basics defaults. We're going to say C, Next. We're going to actually create a, just say sample app. This will be a sample application. It's going to be in our downloads directory and so forth. Hit Next. We're going to create, release, and debug, and say Finish. Now by default, this is going to create a file for us, main.c. I'm going to delete this because I want to show you how you can create your own single source file. So here I'm just going to say remove from the project. And again, the purpose of this lecture is to introduce you to the build and compilation phases. It's not necessarily important for you to understand the code in the lecture because we're going to go through that another time. So now that I have a project, I can right click on the project, or I can go up to File and I can say New File. So let's make sure we have our project selected and say File, New. We're going to just say Empty File. This is going to create a new empty file in our project, and we're going to add it. So we're just going to say Yes. And what we're going to do is we're going to name this, and we're going to put it in the sample app. We're just going to name it test.c. And it's going to be empty, and we're going to create it for both debug and release. And so now you'll see that we have one source file, test.c, inside here. So we have an empty source file. I'm just going to put some example code in here. You don't need to understand the code. So we're just going to quickly copy and paste, or actually quickly type this in. And you'll see this code completion, which is nice for the IDE. But I'm just going to create a basic program with some example code, and we'll explain this later. So this would be the editing phase where we actually edit the source code. And so again, don't worry about this code, but we have a source file in here. And what we want to do once we've actually created our source file is you'll notice that there's some code in here, and that the name of the file has a C extension. So that's important. We have test.c. And if we want to now go to the next step, we want to compile it, we can go up to the build option, and we can say build. And what this is going to do is it's going to compile the program, test.c, and it's going to link it. So if we say build, you'll then see that there's output in the below log. Might be a little tough to see. But when I selected the build option, it actually tried to build the sample app project, which included one source file, test.c. And what this output window is showing on build.log is the command used to compile, which is Ming32GCC. It then used some compiler flags, you don't really worry about it, and it took as input test.c. And then from the input, the next thing it did was it linked, right after it compiled, the O file that was generated. But this will be the window where you can see any compiler errors or if it compiled successfully. You'll notice here that there are 0 arrows and 0 warnings. So I was able to compile successfully. So that compilation and linking worked fine. To run my program, all I have to do is go up to Build and say Run. And I could have done the build and run in one step if I wanted, but I wanted to just demonstrate that how you would do it. So now I would say Run. When I run it, you're going to see that the program was actually run. And what happened in Windows is it brought up a separate window. It's basically the DOS prompt. And it ran the program with output. And what you'll see here before we look at the output is you'll see that the build.log actually ran another command, which is it basically executed the app that was generated from the code. And then when you double click on that in Windows, it generates this DOS prompt. The output comes to the DOS prompt. So this is sort of, right here, this window here is the console. And this is where the output goes. You'll notice that the output of the program is, hi, my name is Jason. And then you say process return 0. That's just saying the program returned. Press any key to continue. But the output here means that the program ran with some output. And again, this is the console or the terminal. We can press any key to close it. And you will want to occasionally clear out your window too sometimes to just get rid of some of the, so it's easy to run. But you can see that build.log will show you. And you can build messages also can show you that there were no errors and so forth. There are different windows. So if you run, if you compile and it runs fine, you have no problems, then you're good to go. And this program didn't do much. It just output some data to the console. But what would happen if you ran and there were some errors? So for example, all C statements have to have a semicolon. Say I get rid of that semicolon and I save the file. And every time you added a source code file, you always want to save it. You can do a Control S, or you can go up to File, and you can say Save Project, or Save All Files, or right there, Save All Files. And now we have an error. So now when I try to build it, I go up to the Build menu and I say Build. You'll notice that if I go to the Build log, there's a big red highlight that says 1 error. And it's mainly because I forgot my semicolon. But this window here is the build log window that shows you that there's compilation errors. So you cannot run a program with a compilation error. We know that. Okay, so this is what you would see in errors, and running successfully is what you would see prior. So again, the purpose of this lecture is to show you how to build and run a program. The source code doesn't necessarily matter. So we were able to create a project. We were able to create a source file, test.c, and then we built it, which did the compiling and linking at the same time, and then we wanted to execute it, we just hit the run command. And if you have any errors when you build and compile, you'll get a red highlight and you'll have to go back and fix that error by adding the semicolon, hitting Control S to save, and then going back to build, and if we build again, you'll see there's no errors, and it'll build.log. So it built successfully, and then we can then run it again. And again, running it will bring up our window here and our output for the program. Okay, so a nice little demonstration to show you how you can build and run your first program. In our next lecture, I'm going to give you a challenge. I'm going to give you an assignment to do pretty much the same thing, except change the output a little. So you don't really need to understand the source code that much. You just want to change the output. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Thank you.